Welcome to Legendary Talks, a My Spring Harvest podcast, bringing you the best sermons, Bible studies, and seminars from over the decades. Today we're hearing from Sheridan Voysey and Phil Knox at Spring Harvest
Good
2024.
afternoon, everybody. My name is Sheridan Voysey.
And my name is Phil Knox.
And Phil Knox, are you not happy to see so many people turning up for a seminar on friendship?
It's amazing,
Isn't it? It really is.
Thank you for coming.
We are a couple of guys who have, funnily enough, individually stumbled on this most important of topics completely separately. And then we had a conversation, a very important conversation that happened this time last year at Spring Harvest. If we do forget to tell you that story, we haven't shared it anywhere else, would you please put your hand up at the end and say you've forgotten about the story? Because there is something for us to share. But we've come at this topic separately. Then everybody kept on saying, Sheridan, have you heard about Phil? He's writing about this too. And Phil, you got the same kind of emails. And then we've kind of joined forces to start really engaging both the church and the culture to start thinking about this most overlooked, undervalued, yet most powerful of relationships. We've got different ways into this whole kind of topic. Tell us about yours, Phil.
Yeah, so I, like many people, had a terrible pandemic. So I'm an author, and my first book came out in March 2020, which, as many of you will recall, was the week all the bookshops closed. I can't tell you how discouraged and disappointed I was. I even remember vividly having a pity party for one under the duvet, where I had a little kind of, shout at the Lord for a moment. But then far more poignantly and tragically, my mum, who'd been battling cancer for about 6 months, we found that cancer was terminal. So I spent the first few weeks of lockdown sat at the end of my mum's driveway, watching her physically deteriorate. But this was a woman who had given her life to Jesus as a young girl. And it was like she'd been paying into a spiritual bank account all those years, and in those dying moments was withdrawing from it. But for us, those of us who were left behind and bereaved, it was a devastating time, especially at a time when we were socially distanced, which led to isolation, and all I wanted was to be with people. But that made me start thinking about friendship, because I also remember who was there for me. Do you know, as a family, because of our church community, we didn't cook a meal for about 3 months, because people provided meals. Our kitchen looked like a florist, our living room looked like Clinton's cards. We were just so loved. So I began to investigate how amazing friendship is, and was just become absolutely captivated by it. And so that was the beginning of a journey. That was my way in. Yeah. Sheridan, how about you?
Yeah. There's been a couple of catalysts for me. But I'll take you back in your imagination to a very drab government office seminar room in 2008. And my wife and I are sitting in this seminar room, and it's a seminar on fostering and adoption. And by this stage, we're about 8 years into what would become a 10-year journey trying to start a family, which ultimately did not end with the blessed, happy ending that we so expect with a story like this. So that story is another one that's told in a book called Resurrection Year. It's in the bookshop. Happy to sign it for you. 2008, we're sitting in this seminar room. We're exploring fostering and adoption at that stage. And we had a very straight-talking Australian seminar leader who left us in no uncertain terms as to what might be involved. He said, yes, there's going to be wonderful blessings involved if you bring a child into your family this way. But I kid you not, it's going to be difficult too. What are you going to do when the little girl that you've adopted won't hug you because of her attachment issues, because of her traumatic background? What are you going to do when the little boy that you're fostering is punching holes in your walls because of all the pent-up anger that he's got because of his background? And then she started saying, you're going to need a network around you, a support group around you. And then she asked this question, which burrowed under my skin and has not left me ever since. She said, who can you call at 2 a.m. when everything's gone wrong? And I remember my pen hovering over the workbook because I didn't know who to write down. And it wasn't that I didn't have friends. But at this stage, we were still in Australia at that stage. We'd been in Sydney 2 years. Before that, we'd had 6 years in Perth in Western Australia. We'd had 26 years in Brisbane, up in the north of of Australia. I had friends in Brisbane and in Perth, but I had not spent any time investing in friendships in Sydney, and so I would not know who to call at 2 a.m. if everything had gone wrong. But then again, Sheridan, I had to ask myself, how intentional was I being about keeping in touch with the friend in Perth and the friends in Brisbane? And I had to say, you're completely failing. So that was the big catalyst for me of saying, I need to get intentional about this whole area of friendship.
Yeah. And we've become absolutely convinced that this is such a needy topic for the church. We think it's the most important, least talked about relationship in church and in society. It matters for discipleship, it matters for evangelism, it matters for unity, it matters for intergenerational and intercultural church. And we think it's really important. Our prayer for you and our prayer for us today is that each of us grows in this area in terms of our passion for it, but also the relational muscles that God has given us to exercise. But we also recognize we can't do this on our own. We need God to speak to us. So I wonder if just for a moment, Sheridan, why don't you pray for us?
Yeah.
But why don't each of us, just in our own hearts this afternoon, ask God to really speak to us as we explore this really important subject.
God of friendship, would you so bring to the surface in our lives in this next 45 minutes the people that you want us to connect with, the relationships that you want us to reinvigorate, the people in our workplaces and our churches that we could connect with. Lord, would you help us to reposition friendship in this most special place that it should occupy? Because it all comes down to you, God of friendship, Father, Son, Spirit, in perfect unity. Lord, may we follow you in your image. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So Sheridan, how bad is it?
Okay, bad news before good news, right? So here's the bad news. But it's actually, to some degree, it's comforting in a funny kind of way. About 20% of adults have no close friends right now in the UK. 20%. Every fifth person you walk past has no close friends. About 10% of those have got no friends at all. If that's you, you are not alone. As we'll find out, it doesn't take much to be in that situation. It just doesn't take very much. And all of us have been in this situation, maybe right now, and certainly in the past at some stage. About 50% of us find making new friends really difficult. So again, if you're in that position, you're not alone. And this is a global trend. 25% of Australians have no one they can talk to or turn to. The number of people in America who say that they have no close friends has quadrupled since 1990. When the Gallup organization did a global survey of 140 countries, they came up with this headline: almost a quarter of the world feels lonely. So if that's you, you are not alone.
And then what happens when you drill down into some of the kind of demographics within our society is you find there's some people groups who are specifically affected. And so men, 1 in 3 men, according to the Movember Foundation, say they have no close friends. 40% of young adults, 16 to 24-year-olds, by the way, the most connected generation in history, say they always or often feel lonely. Got a situation in the UK at the moment where there's a minister in government whose responsibility is loneliness. At the end of last year, the World Health Organization announced that loneliness is a pressing global health threat. We promise that we are good news people, but that's a bit of the picture of the bad news in our world.
So the kind of language that's coming out at the moment is that we are having an epidemic of loneliness. That's kind of strong language, right? That we are in a friendship recession. So our question to you is, why? What's going on? So turn to the person next to you. It doesn't have to be somebody you already know. Even better if it's somebody you don't know. And we want you to talk for 2 minutes just to find out. In fact, let's make it 1. Make it nice, smart, you can make a friend in 1 minute. What are the biggest barriers to friendship today that you've experienced? Your time starts now.
I think we're fine. I think we can do. Okay, great. If you can begin to draw those to a close, that'd be cool. Great stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, can you stop being friends?
What have you come to this seminar for in the first place?
Dial down the human connection. Sheridan, so tell us, what have you found? What are the biggest barriers to friendship?
Okay, so I'm sure that almost all of you will have come across almost everything that you've probably said is absolutely true. Here's what the research says. The number one problem is busyness. It's not having no social skills, it's not being socially awkward, it's having no time. And even if you do have time, it doesn't mean, of course, that your friend has time. And this is the nature of friendship, right? Is that even if you are available, it doesn't mean that they're going to be available. Busyness is the first one. The biggest thing we can do for our friendship potential these days is actually to start carving out time for friendship, making it a higher priority. Second one, mobility. Guilty as charged. Lived in 2 countries, 5 major cities, 15 house moves at least. Every time you kind of pull up that tree of friendship and you think that you can carry it over, some of those trees will survive. Some of them will not survive replanting. Now, we can have a whole seminar on friendship across distance. There are things you can do. That's for another seminar, another afternoon. But you can do it, but it's hard. Mobility makes it more difficult. Shyness, that's when shyness comes in. Shyness, ultimately, is not a lack of ability as much as it's a lack of skills. And if we can actually just get some micro skills in place, you can overcome shyness. So shyness is another one. I would like to add a 4th one to this, and this is confusion. We do not know what friendship is anymore. If you go online, you will find an absolute wash of internet stories about lovely, touchy-feely, cutesy-piesy friendships that really aren't friendships. Look at this one. The amazing story of how a 2-year-old became best friends with an elderly neighbor who is 99. I'm sorry, as lovely as that story is, it's not friendship. The 2-year-old could probably call the 99-year-old at 2 a.m. Could the 99-year-old call the 2-year-old? I'm just wondering. I know that kids grow up very quickly these days. Liverpool's Fabinho makes friends with a fan on holiday. They have one dinner and suddenly a friendship. If you have somebody up here, you've got a fan who's looking up to this football god, just saying, oh, wow, you're up there on a pedestal. Oh, that is not friendship. Friendship requires equality. It requires mutuality. That's not friendship. This is my favorite one, the man who made friends with a fish.
25 years.
25 years? I mean, they've been consistent, haven't they? But hang on. Is it just me, or does that fish look decidedly uncomfortable? Give me the answer out loud. Man's best friend is a... And why not? Here's my Rupert Reginald McScruffy. Is he not cute? He does it to me every day. Oh, but I am not his friend. I am Big Dog. I'm the one who takes him out for walks and feeds him, you know? And as much as I love him and he loves me, we're not actually friends. And of course, then there's a Facebook friend, somebody you met at a party years ago, didn't particularly like at the time and haven't seen since. We are confused about what friendship really is.
Sheridan, you may be my friend, but I'm not calling you Big Dog. Another thing that I've really found as I've looked at friendship in terms of the way we spend our time is not necessarily that our working patterns we're not working necessarily any more than we were. Work is, of course, a huge contributor to busyness. But one of the things that's happened is that the nature of work has changed. So over the last 100 years or so, many more people have become what's called knowledge workers. If your primary activity at work is thinking for a living, I'm guessing many people in this room that's the case, around 40% of the UK statistically will be what's called knowledge workers, primarily using our brain at work, then that has an impact on our relational muscles because we are spending the same energy at work to think that we also use to make friends at home. And what I found especially true is that for me, and that in my friendships, because I think for a living, some people might say I don't, but I promise you I do. I write and I speak and I think and I research all day, which means that often when I get to 5 o'clock, I'm exhausted, just ready to crash. But my best mate, he's a builder. He digs for a living. Now, he would also say, and especially his clients, if you're one of his clients, he also thinks a bit as well. But by the time he gets to 5 o'clock, he's been primarily using his body rather than his mind. He is ready for friendship. And that does have an impact because many of us are exhausted by the time it comes to social time in the evenings. The other thing that I found has an impact on us is our social media. We are spending huge amounts of time. The average Brit spends 4.5 hours a day on their screens, on their phones. We touch our phones thousands of times a day. And social media is brilliant, isn't it, for maintaining loads of relationships. It's brilliant for finding out what our friends are having for lunch or how good their holidays are. But it can lead to an illusion of friendship. Just because we have 1,000 connections on Facebook doesn't mean we have any friends we can call at 2 in the morning. And I think we're still in that stage of learning how to use social media. And we need friends. We've got music and movies on demand. We've got the world in the palm of our hand. We've got fun trips, internships, play scripts, and hair snips. Film clips, fish and chips at the touch of our thumb tips. Need to lead or breed or feed your cat? Well, it turns out there's an app for that. but we need friends. We've got computers for a fiver, cars without a driver. We've got louder, further, faster, more, a bigger network than ever before, but we need friends. And friends are amazing. See, friendship is atomic. From the nursing home to the coffee shop, from the boardroom to the playground. It's relational connections that make the world go round. See, we were created to know and be known. It's better to eat kebabs with friends than salad on your own. And yet, we trace in populous places. We're strangers in rooms of familiar faces. We crave deeper meaningfuls, but experience anonymity. We dance superficially around the promise of proximity. And we need friends. And quantity is no substitute for quality. We need 5G, HD, 24-carat friends. Lifelong, fight strong, tag along, forgive all wrong friends. Friends to talk through our problems personal. Friends to call when the cancer's terminal. When it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, your year. You just remember what your old pal said. We get by with a little help from our friends. And look to the one who made friendship possible, whose nail-pierced hands bridge the chasm uncrossable. His scandalous invitation follows the most glorious of amends. There is no greater love than they that lay their life down for their friends. So, celebrate with me the ship most worth sailing, and follow the example of the friend unfailing. May we raise our game and drop our cover, invest our energies in one another. May we still be there when the rain starts to fall, and accept the most important friend request of all, because we need friends.
So what is a friend? Let's turn the bad news towards the good news. What is a friend? And this is where I'm very tempted to quote the old Jim Hayes joke. A friend is someone who helps you move house. A best friend is someone who helps you move a body. Or to paraphrase Groucho Marx, a friend is someone who visits you in jail, a good friend is someone who bails you out, and a best friend is someone who turns to you in the cell and says, "That was fun." Here's the definition we use at this new charity we're launching called Friendship Lab. A friend is someone I can talk to, depend on, grow with, and enjoy. A friend is someone I can talk to, depend on, grow with, and enjoy, and each one of those elements is vitally important. Someone we can talk about the little things, about the football scores and the holiday plans, to the big things about the doubts and fears that we're facing. Someone to depend on. They're the 2 a.m. friends we can call when everything has gone wrong. Someone to grow with. Aristotle, all those years ago, said that friendship is a school for virtue. And don't we have even better verses along those lines? Proverbs 27:17. Iron sharpens an iron. And as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. We make ourselves more fruitful and more... We take on more of the image of Christ in the company of our friends because they help us out, they encourage us, they help us discern our talents, discern our callings, maybe call us out when we're starting to stray a little bit. Somebody to grow with and someone to enjoy. Maybe that's because you stimulate my thinking, or because we both really enjoy the same sports, or maybe because, just like me, you too like moody European films with subtitles. You know, the kind where everybody dies in the end, but they die so meaningfully. Talk to, depend on, grow with, and enjoy. Try that on for size in terms of a definition.
Yeah, it's great. You know, over the last year, as we've done the book and kind of talked in lots of different spaces about friendship, I often get asked, what is a friend? And I can't better Sheridan's definition. I think it's amazing. The work he's done on that is amazing. But the next thing I want to encourage you with is that, as Sheridan alluded to, the antidote to busyness is intentionality. And so one of the key kind of takeaways as we move away from the seminar is, I want us to think about being really intentional. However intentional you are about friendship, I want to encourage you to be even more intentional, because this stuff really matters. And as I investigated friendship, one of the things that I lent into really heavily was the science of friendship. And I came across this leading anthropologist who's not a Christian called Robin Dunbar. And Robin Dunbar asked the question, he looked at the size of our brains as humans, the way we're created by God. He didn't believe we were created by God, but he looked at the way we were created by God. And he asked, how many friends can we have? What's our capacity in terms of our human body, the way we're made, for capacity for friendship? And he found that we can have about 150 friends. So if you've got 2,000 Facebook friends and you say, they're all my friends, science says otherwise. And so, but he said the capacity of 100, by the way, if you haven't got 150 friends, don't worry. That's the upper limit, okay? It's before you panic and run out and start dragging people into your friendship circles. But then what Robin Dunbar is, he asked, how many good friends can you have? And how many great friends can you have? And this non-Christian scientist found that you can have about 12 good friends. And you can have 3 great friends. And as I'm reading this, I'm like, that sounds really familiar. Because it turns out 2,000 years ago, when the man who claimed to be God came from highest heaven to lowest earth to change the world, he was quite intentional about relationship. And he formed a friendship circle of 12 disciples. And then what he did, as I've investigated this and as I read the Gospels while investigating friendship, I found that not only did he have an outer circle of 12, he had an inner circle of 3. And as I read this, to be honest, I found it a bit awkward. Because there's a few moments in the Gospels where Jesus says to 9 of his disciples, you wait there. Thomas, Bartholomew, Simon, not the less important one, James the lesser. I mean, it goes without saying, doesn't it? They get to stay behind, and Jesus says, Peter, James, and John with me. Not only that, these were significant moments in Jesus' life. The Mount of the Transfiguration, where he goes up the mountain and his Father speaks the words of affirmation over him. This is my Son whom I love, with him I am well pleased. Gethsemane, just before he's about to go to the cross. By the way, the Transfiguration's just about the highest physical moment Jesus goes to. Just about the lowest is the Valley of Gethsemane. What does he do there? He says, Peter, James, and John with me. Do you know who I feel really sorry for? Andrew. Do you know why? Because James and John are brothers. They get to go with Jesus. Peter gets to go with Jesus. Andrew was Peter's brother. Andrew must have been sat there rubbing his hands together, waiting for his name to be called, but it never comes. Do you know what's even worse? It was Andrew who introduced Peter to Jesus.
Right. Good point.
But Jesus is really intentional with who he spends time with. And I want to encourage us that we can't be okay friends with everybody at the cost of being great friends with a few. We should be as inclusive as possible with who we spend time with. But I want to urge us to be more Christ-like in our relationships. And that is to do with how we treat people. But it's also to do with how we spend our time. And the final thing I love about Jesus and the way he chooses how to spend his time intentionally is he always is praying for who he spends time with. Before Jesus chooses his outer circle of 12, he spends a night praying about who he's going to call into his circle. But also, he is the great connector. And one of the questions Sheridan and I often get asked is, if we've got no friends, where do we start? You know, I think that where we start is we pray. Why? Because I think God is the great connector. I think God has this kind of like network in front of him of people who he's kind of going, do you know, I'd love it if they got on with them. I know how they're created. They really hit it off with them. As Jesus is dying for the sins of the world, as we've just celebrated last weekend, as he's dying, he says to John, here is your mother. And he says to his mum, here is your son. In physical agony, strung up, dying for the sins of the world, Jesus still has the presence of mind to connect people. And I think he's still doing that today.
So good. So Phil and I have kind of developed a friendship over the last, 18 months max, I think, and I'm really growing to love this guy. Do you hear the passion in his voice? You hear it? You just absolutely hear it. So the next thing we do, by the way, this is your start of your homework, take a picture of this, and what you want to do now is kind of work on these outer rings and then kind of work out, well, who are the people that are in the outer rings? Then who are the people maybe in my life that are in the inner rings? And maybe there's nobody in the absolute inner ring. That's what we're here for. We're going to learn how to do that. But start mapping out where the friends are and the connections and the acquaintances that are in your life now based on those rings. And then after that, we need to get intentional about conversation. Friends, we would be so much more ahead in this area if we just learnt to ask better and more questions of each other. Now, I would suggest to you that there's kind of 3 levels of questions that you can employ at this moment. One group is going to get you from acquaintance to casual friend. Another group of questions will get you from casual friend to friend. And another group will get you from friend to closer to closest friend. Here are the 3 categories. The first group, is questions related to who they are. This is your basic things about their family, where they work, what they do with their time, etc., etc. You don't ask these questions of people kind of up here because you already know. Neither do you ask a question about what they love, because that's probably a little bit too intimate. That's where you then move from casual friend to friend, and you find out what they love, what are their talents, what are their passions, what do they love to do with their time, and then what they fear or hope for. You're never going to ask that of the first group. It's just too intimate. But once you get a few months down the track, then you start asking those kinds of questions. We are going to be putting this into practice right now. Phil Knox, please come up here onto the stage.
I feel like there should be a theme song at this point.
I'm going to invite you to point your phone at that QR code, because I'm going to employ some of the questions that you can then get on a free download out of these 3 sections of questions that you can employ straight away the moment you walk out of here, even with people you meet at Spring Harvest for the very first time. He doesn't know. I've given him a little bit of heads up about one question because it needed a little bit of forethought. But Phil, whatever we're doing these seminars together, I'm not letting him know the questions. The first set of questions we asked at the last conference we were at, I asked him a question from the first group, and that was, what 3 things would your perfect weekend include? And if I remember correctly, my friend, it was having a run with your son in the morning. It would be in the evening, gathering around the fire pit with friends, and about midday, it would be something else that I can't remember.
Right, I can't remember either.
Okay. Now, the next question I asked him after that was a question from the second group of questions, and I'm not too sure if our friendship is going to actually go anywhere, folks, because the question was, what was the last film that brought a tear to your eye? My answer was Godfather 3. His was Home Alone. We're in slightly different orbits. So my question, 2 questions for you this afternoon, because I'm getting to know Phil. Here's my 2 questions for you. What do you wish you had more time for right now?
Trying not to sound too Christian. I wish I had more time and energy to read. So I think I love reading. I love kind of big ideas, and so I feel like it's a bit like the friendship thing. Sometimes I'll get to the end of a day and just not have the energy to really employ my mind to be able to do that. And so I wish I had more time and space to kind of busy family life, busy work life, to just sit and read.
And what would you be reading?
Theology,
Yep.
Friendship stuff,
Yeah.
but also just kind of, I love the kind of the social sciences, what makes people tick, the kind of Malcolm Gladwell, that kind of, those insights into how God's made us.
I just listened to a great podcast with Malcolm Gladwell and Mitch Albom, so I'll pass it on to you.
Same question to you before we go. Sheridan, what do you wish you had more time to do?
Photography.
Nice.
So photography is my hobby, and some of my photos, about 5 to 10% of them actually turn out half decent. And at the moment, they're all sitting on my hard drive. And I would just love to do something with my photography, but for similar reasons to you, at the end of the day, do I want to be sitting at a screen and processing film? I just can't do it, so I can't get to it. And it's one of the great frustrations of my life. It really is. I'd love to spend more time on photography. Now, do you see what happened with that question? That question has told me something about Phil's passions and what he really loves to do. And where would he go? He'd be reading theology. Oh, well, actually, interesting. I've got a Stanley Hauerwas theology book, that I brought up within the. So there's something we've got in common. We've got a little bit more to talk about. And then friendship stab, that's going to work. But also the social sciences. Malcolm Gladwell. We've got a connection there. Do you see what? One simple question. What do you wish you had more time for now can actually help to build a connection.
That's great.
So the next question is, who are your heroes, past or present?
I think my hero is my dad. So my dad died when I was 21. And so I never knew him kind of into kind of proper adulthood. But he was a man who faithfully followed Jesus. And when he was a very successful lawyer, so he was senior partner in a law firm, but he felt called by God to move his family to a council estate in Birmingham. And we could have lived, he was really wealthy. We could have lived in most houses in Birmingham. But he felt called to do that. And I guess I saw in him the cost of following Jesus. But he also had this amazing ability to be really high-flying. He would talk to like government ministers about housing policy and social policy and stuff. But I never felt as his son that he didn't have time for me. Wow. And he had this amazing ability to kind of talk to people at different levels of kind of society. So like he'd be driving me to school and there'd be a homeless person by the side of the road, and he'd like take his gloves off and give them to the homeless person. But yet also had this ability to connect with people, very, very important people. And so I really admire that. And I think I guess when I think about who I want to be the same example to my kids that my dad was to me.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to tear up thinking talking about it. Yeah.
I think my hero has just become your dad. What a man. What a man. Mine are far less emotive, far less beautiful. Two come to mind. It's funny because your heroes are the people that actually you want to become like. You want to become like your dad. And you want to emulate something of them. But unless it's somebody you've seen close up like that, of course, our heroes can let us down when we actually meet them in person, can't they? What's the old phrase? Never meet your heroes. You're going to be disappointed. When I had my first book out some years ago, a reviewer wrote in a newspaper, this is Philip Yancey with an Australian accent. And I was quite touched by that, because actually Philip Yancey has been somebody that I've really, really appreciated, and somebody who has grappled with life from a faith perspective, but in an accessible, because of his journalistic background, in an accessible way that I would be more than happy to give a Philip Yancey book to my non-Christian friend. And that's what I've always wanted to, that's my calling has always been, to be a Christian presence in the mainstream world, and that's even what Friendship Lab is going to be built on. So Yancey, and I've actually had an opportunity to meet him, had dinner, numerous interviews and things like that. So that would be one. But C.S. Lewis, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but there is so much that I've learned from C.S. Lewis. But I do have to ask myself, if I was to meet C.S. Lewis, if I had been back around, in the 60s when he was around, would I have liked him? You've been so close to your dad. You saw him up until the age of 21. You saw a real man to follow. And that is beautiful.
Yeah, thanks. Isn't Sheridan amazing at asking questions? I feel when we think about growing our relational muscles, there's so much to learn. And even just, someone who's investigated friendship, no matter how far you get, I think there's an opportunity to help grow that ability to ask really good questions. And we're going to come on to, in a moment, a few more resources to help you be able to do that. But we want to kind of move into a section now where we really inspire us about how good great friendship is. So Sheridan, you've got a question to ask us to help us begin to think about this.
Okay, turn to somebody next to you. It can be the same person that you have just been speaking to, can be somebody on the other side. Even better if it's somebody you don't know, and ask them this question. Describe a moment where you could say, that was friendship. We'll give you 1.5 and your time starts now.
If you are enjoying this episode of Legendary Talk, you can find more episodes at myshplus.org. As well as Legendary Talks, we have over 15,000 talks from Spring Harvest and other Christian events spanning the past 20 years. To discover more, head to myshplus.org now.
Always delightful to hear a room talking about how good friendship is. But if we haven't whet your appetite already for how good friendship is, we'd love to just share some of the benefits that we found. Because it turns out that the sciences, the sages, the sociologists, and the scriptures all agree that friendship is just so good for us. So one of the things I investigated, as I shared, is the science of friendship, and looked into the various chemicals that are released when we interact. And so when you connect with people, as was happening there as the volume rose in the room, when you leave that fire pit, having spent an evening having great connection moments with friends, when you kind of leave the coffee shop having had a moment where one of you or two of you have opened up to one another, as Sheridan and I were on stage sharing intimately with one another, if you'd have scanned our brains and our bodies, you'd have sensed a chemical and detected a chemical called oxytocin. Oxytocin is a really powerful chemical in our body. It's the same chemical that, by the way, connects a mother and baby. It's really powerful. And the reason we do it is God has made it to feel good when you connect with others. There's another chemical in our body that friendship affects called cortisol. Now, cortisol is your fight and flight chemical. Your body produces it in the morning to help you wake up and get up and alive. Little theme drop there. And cortisol's really good for us in short doses. It gets your heart going. It's kind of fight or flight. But a high baseline of cortisol is really dangerous. Basically, if you've got a high baseline of cortisol, it means your body is constantly preparing you for action and means it's not doing some of the core business of preventing you getting disease and looking after itself, which means that if you have a high base level of cortisol, you are more prone to heart attacks, you're more prone to cancers, you're more prone to all kinds of diseases like diabetes because your body's not protecting itself. And research has shown that if you have one good friend, you have a significantly lower level of cortisol. And that means it is genuinely better to eat kebabs with friends than salad on your own. For the record, the position of Phil Knox and the Evangelical Alliance and Spring Harvest is that you should live healthily and have friends. Yeah. But if you're going to choose one, have great friends. This was worked out in a case study in America where in the 1950s there was a town in Pennsylvania called Roseto when no one was having heart attacks and no one could work out why. So doctors, scientists looked at the water sources, they looked at the air quality, they looked at the diet and the lifestyle of these people. It wasn't their lifestyle. They were eating lard-soaked meatballs, smoking cigars and drinking red wine with abandon. But what they found was, it was the quality of the relationships. 3 to 4 generations lived under one roof. There was religious life at the heart of the communities. It turns out that the secret of eternal life is not what you know, but who you know. And if you're a Christian, that sounds familiar. But you only have to go as far as the first few pages of the Bible to read this. 8 times in the creation narrative, God says things are good or very good as he makes them. First thing he describes as not good in Genesis 2:18 is this: it is not good for man to be alone. Friendship is seriously good for us.
Yeah, it really is. Would you like some more good news on friendship? And 3 people say, yeah, maybe. How about this? It decreases anxiety and depression. I don't know. Does that make a headline at the moment? One of the biggest needs that we have right now, those who have more friends, have better resilience against anxiety and depression. It increases meaning and happiness. That's a good thing. It boosts our immune system. It does amazing things, like safeguard against addictions, which always hover around isolation. It increases our threshold for pain. Some have likened its effects to morphine. And it extends our lifespans by about 7 years. That's pretty good news. So where do we go from here? Can I please recommend my friend Phil Knox's book, The Best of Friends? It's really, really good. I've endorsed it, and I'm more than happy to. He brings the science and the scriptures. What was the third S? The science, the scriptures, and the sociology together to really have a wonderful biblical exploration of friendship. It's great. Churches are buying this by the box, though, doing it as a kind of a worldwide, as a whole church-wide study. So it's really, really good.
The next thing to tell you about is in July, there's an amazing course coming out from Sheridan's team at Friendship Lab. Sheridan has been so captivated by friendship that he's launched this charity called Friendship Lab, and I want to urge you to get involved. The tools that he demonstrated here are part of the website. There's going to be a 6-week course available from July, which he is working so hard to produce. It's kind of like an alpha course for friendship, and it's been looked into by universities. It's kind of evidence-based. The pilots have been amazing. The impact on those who've gone through the pilots has been extraordinary, and I urge you from July, if you're looking, whether in society or in the church, to run something around friendship, Friendship Lab is going to be amazing.
Thank you, buddy. So that is going to be a course that you can take out to your society, to your community, to connect with them. If you want something that you can really go deep with, well, watch this video from my friend Phil.
Good friendship changes everything. It's so good for us in a physical sense that people with good friendships live longer, even if they eat unhealthily. It's so vital to a life of faith. We cannot follow Jesus alone. From Genesis to Revelation, from let there be light to the final amen, the story of God is about friendship. And yet in our world, we are drowning in loneliness and disconnection. Join me, Phil Knox, as we explore the most important, least talked about relationship in our world. All of us need help exercising and growing our relational muscles. And we have this extraordinary opportunity to learn from the Bible and its author. Because the secret of eternal life is not what you know, but who you know. Come and explore friendship from the wisdom of Scripture and the example of the Son of God. Because the best of friends has a name, and his name is Jesus.
So that is a 5-session Bible study that you can use straight away. So one more QR code for you. If you scan that QR code, you will be able to get that at a very, very good rate.
It's free.
There you go. Can't get a better deal than that. Okay, we have time for questions. So with the wonderful stewards and their wonderful work, if one or two of you, probably a couple of you actually, because we've got a fair few people to get around, could grab a mic. And let's fill the next 3-4 hours with questions that you have now based on what Phil and I have presented to you. If you've got a question, pop your hand up and let's start these nice and rapidly so we can get through lots of them together. I'm sure you've got questions. Okay, we've got a lady. Sorry? Oh, the story. So we'll get to the story after the Q&A. That's going to be the payment. Thank you. So, but remind us, definitely. Okay, right there.
I'm guessing this is being recorded, but so I'm not going to give any names to this, but this is actually regarding my children. My children are now 18 to 25, and it's a case of where do they find friends? Two are at university, one is doing A-levels, and they may be busy, they're not Christian, but they find it difficult to find and make friends. Where do they go?
Okay, I've got a couple of tips on that, and then we'll come to you, Phil. Yes, so when you look at the friendlessness statistics, 18 to 24, there's a big jump there. And then it levels out for a little bit, and then the next bump, which was surprising to me, is actually 35. And so that actually makes sense, is that once we get married, for many of us will get married. Once we have kids, many of us will have kids. Once we move away for work, many of us will do that. It becomes harder and harder and harder because then life just gets busy. 18 to 24, this is the challenge, right? Something with Phil was talking about, most connected generation. The two that are in university. So here's where I would help people to start. After praying, the next thing that you do is you start where you are. So for the two that are at university, that is a really good place to start. Are the two at university Christians? They're not Christians. Okay. So there are always some sort of, it would be great for them to connect with a Christian group, but there is always a number of entry points, particularly at the beginning of the year, where they can, or beginning of the academic year, where they can enter into some sort of college-based community groups. But start where they are in terms of their classes. Look for potential acquaintances and then start from there. So you start where you are. Second thing is to start with what you love. If you want to meet new friends and you don't really particularly have an interest in Italy, don't start learning Italian. Some people do that. And actually, 6 months in, you're going, this is hard slog. Start with what you love. What are the sports that they love? What are the things that they love? And then start there and start making connections. And then after that, they need to look for the spark. And this is an acrostic. SPARC, S-P-A-R-C. S is for similarity with the person. P is for similar pastimes. A is for availability. Sometimes the people we connect with are not available to us. Their friendship circles are already full. And so we think that it's something about us. It's not. It's actually something about them. The R is for responsiveness, that actually they kind of respond to us and we to them. Maybe we've got a similar sense of humour. And the C is compatible values. So start where they are, start with what they love, join a group that meets regularly. This is really, really key as well. You don't go and find new friends by going to an author book signing. You do when you join a book club that meets every week. So start with those kinds of things. With the high school person, Phil Knox can answer that one for you.
I just want to add two other vehicles that I found work really well. And the first is that I talked about God as the great connector. one of my observations as I've kind of looked at friendship is there are some people in my life who almost seem to have the friend-making superpower. Do you know what I mean? They're really annoying, aren't they, those kind of people? If you're one of those people, God bless you. But there's some people, and back to our conversation with Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell identifies these and says they're kind of connectors. So what I've done kind of over the years, I've identified that there's some people I know. So I've got a mate called Andy, and I know a good proportion of my friends through Andy. So sometimes it's about trying to find those people to spend time with who then open up doors for other relationships. That's the first thing. Second thing is if we are an Andy, if we are good at those kind of things, and we think about initiatives to find friends, actually, because of technology, there are various ways of setting up cultures and practices that can help us create those spark moments and have conversations that can lead to deeper and ongoing connection. And so a good example of that, there was a guy who wrote a book on male friendship specifically, not a Christian, but he didn't have any spaces where he would find connection with other people. So he started something, age appropriate, over 18, called Pub Club. And he basically texted every bloke in his phone and said, I'm going to be in this pub on Friday from 6 o'clock. I'm going to buy a load of bags of crisps. I'm going to put them on a table, and you buy your own drinks, but we're just going to meet up and chat. And he said, as a result, loads and loads of fellas who had no friendship connections at all started meeting up in this pub. And that's kind of continued. And so my first, I guess, in terms of advising people on how to make friends, find an Andy or be an Andy. And sometimes there's a few little things we can do. And I think there's some innovation in friendship that we've not tapped into in a way. And so kind of that'll be about, if people are really struggling to make friendship, Sheridan's advice is really stellar, but also trying to find those people and those practices. But also being aware, back to the bad news, if friendship is difficult, they are not alone. And we're all not alone in this. We've got to fight against the walls of friendlessness. It's a real challenge.
Yeah. And teach them how to do small talk. We belittle small talk. Small talk leads to big talk. And then any other, get your hands ready. Okay, one there and then one up there. So stewards, if you could keep those gentlemen there, lady there.
Why are we not good at small talk?
Oh, I've never been asked that question. Why are we not good at small talk?
I can dive in here, Sheridan. I think what Sheridan has untapped in terms of the kind of questions, I don't think we're very good at asking the right kind of questions. So I was in youth ministry for years, and I would feel loads more comfortable going into a room with a load of teenagers if I had a few questions up my sleeve ready to ask them. So my favourite question, Sheridan, has demonstrated some of those great questions. My favourite question is, what keeps you busy when you're not here? So when I've been meeting people this morning, I've been saying to them, what keeps you busy when you're not at Spring Harvest on a Tuesday morning? And what that question for me is a great small talk question, because it opens up. If you want to talk about your job, you talk about your job. If you want to talk about your hobbies and what you're passionate about, you talk about that. If you talk about your family, you talk about that. That, for me, on a Sunday morning, at my worst, all I want to do is talk to the people at church who I normally talk about what happened in the football yesterday. At my best on a Sunday morning, I'll go and to people I don't know, people I don't recognise, people who are different to me, different ages, background stories. And one of the things I might say, I met a guy 2 weeks ago at church called Richard, and I said to him, I haven't really seen you before. I'm not around very much. What keeps you busy when you're not here on a Sunday morning? And he likes daffodils. He grows daffodils. So I saw him again on Sunday. I said, how are the daffodils? That is about as good as small talk gets from someone who doesn't really like daffodils. So I think that some of those questions have been really helpful for me. That's only one. There's loads of others.
Yeah. And I think that the broader answer to your question is the fact that we just have not taught anything about friendship. It's hardly touched on in high school curriculum. We never talk about it as adults. And so this is why we're trying to kind of do it. So that's why, actually. It's because we've never been taught about it. The best thing you can do is do what Phil said and actually have at least 3 ice-breaking questions ready in your pocket at any one time. Right, there was a lady down here somewhere. Just here. And then a gentleman up here in the blue. And then there's somebody over here as well.
Yeah. 2 members of our extended family are autistic, and one's a teenager and one is in her 30s. Now, both of those struggle with friends because people don't get them. Their contemporaries just don't get them. They're kind, they are loving, they are wonderful people. But even like the teenager said, I don't find it easy to make friends, which I found, and said that when he was about 10, and I found that really sad. And, I mean, he's bullied at school because people don't get him. They don't understand him. And, the lady in her 30s, is pretty much the same, but has been taken advantage of because she's wanted friends. Yeah. And so people who have taken advantage of her in the most terrible ways you can think of have done that and left her in a very vulnerable place. So it's how we in our family can help these both of them, really, certainly the teenager, so he doesn't end up in the same position as the one generation older.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you have a question with that? I mean, all of that is really, really important. And by the way, I don't know if you're going to ask the question anyway. There is an organization in the United States that specifically looks at friendship skills for those who are on the spectrum. So they're doing some very, very focused, I can't remember the name of it, but if you want to give me your email, I could find it and I could send it off to you. Doing specific science into how can we foster that. I've had adult folks who are on the spectrum, and they've come up to me and said desperately, please help us with this, because I just struggle to connect with other people. But half of it, again, is back to the answer to your question. In general, we haven't taught the skills. Yeah. So with those basic skills in the hands of somebody with on the spectrum, I think we could get a lot further. I really do believe that. I was
going to say, it's not my specialism, but I think my sense is I've got a few kind of friends and extended family members who are autistic. And I think one of the challenges is for all of us, is for autistic people, often they realise, and they're constantly being told that they're different. But in this area of friendship, we need a good conversation that we all struggle, I think. And I think one of the reasons we don't talk about it as much is we think everybody else gets it and everybody else is really good at it. But actually all of us, I think, struggle to walk across the room, have those initial conversations, and helping, I think, especially with my cousin especially, helping them understand actually they're not alone in that. That's not different. All of us struggle in that area. It's been helpful.
2 questions. One, I was in the fire brigade and then I was in the army, and the thing was, we used to be around the mess table and we relied on each other, and it was very much a man's society, which was good. The other thing is, can we have a friendship with our partner or our wife? Because over the years, I was married 48 years, and it was a slow thing, but it was a lovely friendship to start with. And when it ended, we were still very good friends.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had this great moment. I was doing a seminar somewhere on friendship, and this couple came up to me at the end, and they said to me, Phil, we've got a question. And I said, okay. They said, we're married. We're each other's best friend. Is that okay? I said, yes, it's absolutely fine. And actually, if I think about kind of my inner circle, my wife is one of those in my inner circle. And so, yeah, it's absolutely brilliant to be best friends with your spouse. That's completely allowed. The position of Spring Harvest is you're allowed to be friends with your spouse.
The official line is there.
I think I'm standing on confident ground when I say that.
Absolutely. And adding to that, but don't let your spouse be your only friend.
Yeah, great.
And for many of us men, this is what the research shows, that we will say, yes, I've got a best friend, I really have, and she's my wife. Excellent, yes, 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 yes. Yeah. What it really means is she's my only friend. And actually another bit of research will show that you have a better marriage when you have friends. And that makes sense, because if you are putting all of your friendship load onto one pair of shoulders, how about then if that friendship load is actually distributed amongst a whole bunch of shoulders, then he can actually then kind of be free to be your spouse as well. All right, so a question over here somewhere, one there, one here. I think there was somebody over here, wasn't it? Yeah.
I've been a Christian for 30 years, utterly committed to Jesus Christ. And I've found, sadly, I've had to make choices at times, and I've actually lost friends and missed them dearly because of the choices I've had to make. Yeah. And I've also found that making new friends as an absolutely committed Christian with non-Christian people all around you is increasingly difficult the older I get. I'm a pensioner now. Any advice on that?
There's 2 parts of that. Can I just clarify there's the 2 parts? So before the mic goes, just in case we need to clarify something, So the two parts to your question. One was about it's just proving to be more difficult as a committed Christian to make other friends. But the first one was about you losing friends because of the decisions you had to make. I don't want you to expose any secrets or anything like that, but if there's something specific you can tell, so we've just got something to grasp on here. Give us an example of that.
Well, you've got non-church going, non-Christian friends, of which I've got a number, but sometimes that can lead you down to paths that you don't really want to walk as a follower of Jesus. And you have to make hard choices with people that are important in your life.
Yes.
I've had to make a few of those.
Great. Following Jesus first, right?
Yeah.
Following Jesus first makes sense. Spark, the C was compatible values. Really important.
Yeah, for me, a couple of things. I think, first of all, we shouldn't be surprised because Jesus said people will hate you because of me. So I think sometimes when non-Christians let's not pretend that those words aren't true, that sometimes people will not like us and will choose not to be friends with us, and I've experienced that loads. I don't know about anybody else, but for me, there have been moments where people have distanced themselves from me because I'm a follower of Jesus. At the same time, I think when Jesus says we're the light of the world, right, sometimes light repels, but sometimes light attracts. So I would say I'm a better friend, and I've got better friendships with some non-Christians because I follow Jesus. And I think sometimes that we just got to live in that tension. The next thing I would just deeply encourage you in and just say thank you for being friends with those who aren't yet Christians. Yeah. You know, my job, I work for the Evangelical Alliance. I'm a missiologist. I study how people come to faith. You know, most people come to faith not through an evangelist like me or a pastor like some of us in this room. The most significant human relationship and way people come to faith is a friend, a neighbour, a colleague, or a family member. If you're friends with people who aren't yet Christians, keep going, keep praying for them, keep trying to be the best friend you can be. Now, and hear me really well on this. We don't become friends with people to convert them. We become friends with people because we're made in the image of the relational God and for all the reasons we've talked about. But we also recognise, A, the way most people come to faith is through friendship. B, there's some real challenges in this area for the church. So some Talking Jesus research from 2022 found that 46% of Christians don't know a non-Christian well enough to invite them to church. One of my hopes for friendship is in the next 10 years, because us as the church might be better friends, we might be friends more widely with those who will be our friends who aren't yet Christians, and more people might come to faith. But hear me really well, we shouldn't go out to be friends with people to convert them. But I just want to say thank you and well done, and keep going within that. Yep. But also know we live in that tension that some people will not like us because of the difficult decisions we make. But my experience is also that as a friend of many people who aren't yet Christians, I think I'm a better friend to them because I know Jesus, because the relational God lives inside me. Yeah.
It's 3:30. We technically actually have to wrap up now. Thank you so much for the involvement that you've brought this afternoon. It's been absolutely fantastic. Do you want to hear this story before we wrap up?
You almost forgot.
We teased you with it. Okay, so can I set this up and then you can kind of take it on?
Okay, you should tell the whole thing.
So here we were. I kept on getting these emails, hey, have you heard about this guy, Phil? And Phil kept on getting these emails, hey, have you heard about this guy, Sheridan? You both seem to be working on the same stuff. So we got together, I think we probably had maybe a couple of Zoom calls, something like that, talking about our different work, etc. And then we met for the first time in person right here, Minehead, but you know, spiritually, Spring Harvest. And we met in the team lounge and we just had a chat about this. And I had been thinking and praying about whether I should go here with Phil. And here was the fact that I had something to confess. And I thought, you know what? Getting to know him fairly rapidly and I can trust this guy. I would not do this with a whole bunch of other people because trust has to be earned over time. There is a limit to vulnerability. You have a certain degree of vulnerability when you're moving from acquaintance to casual friend, another little bit when you're moving for the further stages. But I recognize he's a brother and I can trust him with this. And I said, Phil, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to get something out into the light so that it doesn't stay in the dark and fester. But there is a part of me that is jealous that you've written the book first.
I went,
sucker! And then you said?
So I said, why don't we not compete for space? So we said, why don't we talk to people like Spring Harvest and say, partly because I think he's far cleverer than me, but I just basically said, why don't we together talk about friendship? And off the back of that, our friendship grew, but we thought it would be also, hopefully has been demonstrated, a bit of beauty in the fact that it's friends talking about friendship. So that is why we are here today with you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Legendary Talks. You can enjoy lots more talks like this at myspringharvestplus.org.